Hi, my name's Nick Hopwood. I'm from the University of Technology, Sydney. Welcome to this series of 4 videos about publishing in academic journals. You might have been asked to watch this video as part of preparation for a workshop that you're going to do with me in the next few days or weeks. In which case, please make note of some questions that you have that you don't think were answered in the video, or anything you think I've missed, as well as some of the key learning points you've taken from this video. If you found this video through YouTube or through my blog, please feel free to add comments or questions in the relevant place below on the video. This first video will be about what's changing and what's not changing in the publishing industry and what the implications of this are for us as academic publishers and researchers.
So let's get into this series of videos on understanding academic journal publishing and peer review. The videos overall will cover the things that you see on the screen here, and I'll introduce them one by one. I strongly recommend you watch them all in this particular sequence. So this first video is really about the publishing industry. Are things changing radically? Are some things not changing? And what do publishers do anyway for us as academics? Lots of things are changing in academic journal publishing. Certainly the scale of things is unprecedented. There are more and more journals, and interestingly they're owned generally by fewer publishers. Who is the biggest publisher will vary on your discipline, but the trend is definitely for more journals to be acquired by fewer journal companies, publishing companies, and the publishing companies are actually acquiring each other, so they're becoming bigger and bigger and fewer of them, but more and more journals for us are publishing. As nearly all journal content is now digitally available from many countries, this changes all sorts of things. We have digital content, there are now video and visual abstracts, different ways of counting who downloads journal articles and who cites them. This has profound implications for how people access and find our papers and why they might bother to read them. I'll come later on to talk about information linkage, but associated with these changes in technology, it's going to become increasingly easy to specify exactly who's written what and paid for by whom. There are now some new risks that weren't there before. There are predatory journal publishers trying to get your work published in their journals, and some of them are fraudulent, and I'll talk to you about how you can avoid those. So there is a risk that you give your work away to illegitimate or unrecognized publishers by accident, and you don't want to do that. There are also big changes to do with how you access journal articles. It used to be rather a stark choice, and I'll show you in a couple of slides how this is changing to be something a bit more nuanced. But there are some things that are not changing in journal publishing. The core values about journals being there to disseminate knowledge, peer review system being there as a mechanism of quality control, and that many journals actually are owned by companies who have ultimately commercial interests and profit motives. There are some special things about academic journal publishing which means it's not going to change in some of the ways that other publishing might be. The essential content, the unit of the journal article, is not profoundly different now from what it has been for many, many years. Although there are new artifacts being added to these, the central piece remains stable. Journals for many disciplines remain a key, or journal articles remain a key form of academic capital, how you build up your academic reputation and maybe get promotion or get a job. In some disciplines, books are very important, may even be more important than journal articles, but still journal articles are a key form of academic capital. The bottom line for getting a journal article accepted is novelty, that you have something new to say. You're saying something that nobody else has said before. That's how people make money out of journal publishing, and that's how journals get status accrued, because people are writing original content that they can't read anywhere else. And finally, rejection has always been a part of academic publishing, and I assume it will always remain so. There are certainly no signs that rejection is disappearing. Now, lots of people seem to think that publishers are the bad guys in this, and that academics do all the writing, peer reviewers, more academics do the reviewing for free, many editors do that for free, and journal publishers get to take all the money. That doesn't seem very fair. Well, it may seem unfair, but in fact journal publishers do a huge amount of things that universities or individual academics are not well positioned to do. They're hugely important in leading these changes that I've been describing. They've supported a lot of startups, and they now pay $1 for every published paper so that it can have a digital object index number. They help a huge amount of things in terms of promoting your work and making people able to find it Also, they help with making it more appealing to readers with things like video abstracts, which I'll mention later in the video. Journal publishers also help protect your intellectual property and make sure that the associations between you and your work stay together. It makes it harder for other people to steal your work. Journal publishers also invest a huge amount of money in infrastructure. They create digital platforms that we use to submit articles, to review articles, and to edit journals. They have systems for peer review. They have systems for download and tracking download and making things available free or through a paywall. Huge amount of online digital infrastructure, as well as traditional print infrastructure. Journal publishers actually do a lot to help editors, reviewers, and authors do their jobs better. They create and publish a lot of helpful videos and written guides, which I suggest that means that journal publishers are actually engaged pedagogically with supporting the academic community. A really good example of this is the video made by James Hardcastle from Taylor and Francis, one of their most watched videos about altmetrics in journal publishing. So, is it the case that the contract between the researcher and the publisher is that the researcher writes the paper and the publisher does all this amazing marketing and makes everybody want to read it? Not quite. You still have a lot of work to do, unfortunately, these days. It used to be that the print-based journals meant, apart from giving out paper copies to people, there wasn't much you could do as an academic to promote readership of your articles. But now there is a lot you can do, and if you don't do it, other people writing similar articles on your topic will be, and you'll fall behind. So there are lots of things you can be doing using Twitter, social media, investing other people in tweeting links to your project or your publications. You might have a blog or use Kudos. You might take up the opportunity to have a video or a visual abstract. You can put lists of publications in your email signature, and you might engage with something like ResearchGate, though you need to be careful doing that. If you see on the right there's a box that describes how altmetrics work. I'll come back to altmetrics in the third video about journal status indicators. But it points to the kind of work that an author might need to do in promoting their own work. If you haven't heard of Sherpa before, use this video as an impetus after watching it to go and find out more about it. This helps widen access to the free versions of journal articles without undermining the publisher's fundamental commercial model. Librarians often are really up to date with the copyright conditions, and Sherpa is a system which makes it much easier to know what you can do with the Word version of your journal article that was accepted by the publishers. Different colours indicate different things that you're allowed to do without infringing the copyright agreement that you have with a particular commercial publisher. I mentioned predatory journals and that the development of these creates new kinds of risk to authors. The risk of losing your work and not being able to publish it in a credible journal, and thinking or being duped into thinking that you're actually publishing for a decent journal when you're not. There are two very easy ways to check on these. Now, nothing is 100% foolproof, but you can go to Beall's list, and Beall has a very, very explicit and transparent process for making judgments about journals, and you can go to Think, Check, Submit. Now, if you're really thinking of a journal and you're not sure whether it's legit or not, talk to your supervisors or other people about it. Generally, a journal owned by one of the big major publishing companies like Wiley, Informer, which would be Taylor and Francis, or Routledge, Springer, Elsevier, Emerald, and they've been around for a while with lots of volumes, or up to volume 25 or 30 or something like that, is going to be safe. You might want to be really careful if the editors of the journal seem very keen to have your papers and very desperate to get submissions, if the peer review takes place extraordinarily quickly with very little critical comment. You might be sprung for a nasty fee to publish, and you might also be very careful if the journal is very new, particularly if you're expected to be in volume 1, issue 1. I mentioned stable links before. Now, it's an amazing thing that's happening. If you don't already have one, you should get an ORCID ID as soon as you finish watching these 4 videos. It's free, and everybody who's thinking of publishing should have one. ORCID actually finds a lot of the articles that you write by default because the articles have digital object indexes. That's what the journal publishers pay $1 for every one, so this DOI number gets created for you. You don't have to do that work. The publishers do it for you, or pay somebody to do it for you. So what ORCID does is can look between the DOI for your work, but you can also add it manually. So there's a stable object identifier for each paper, and there's a stable numerical identifier for each author, which is really important when people start having more than one person has the same name, or for people who might change their names during their life for some reason. Now, what's going to come around the corner very soon is stable object identifiers for funders as well. So you'll be able to see for any one person what they've published and who funded it, for any one paper, who wrote it and who funded it, and for any one funder, what all the different authors and publications resulting from that funding have been. ORCID ID is a really important thing. Get your ORCID ID if you haven't already got one. This is what can happen when algorithms get confused or people get confused between people. There are two Nick Hopwoods working in academia, one of them in Cambridge on a completely different topic for me, and myself in Australia, formerly in Oxford. The stuff in green is true about me, the stuff that's not in green is not. And so here we have contemporary authors completely confusing me and another Nick Hopwood. The idea of ORCID ID and digital object indexes is to avoid this. Now this might seem quite frivolous because it's just somebody trying to write a summary of me or the other Nick Hopwood as an academic. I'm not sure which one they thought they were writing about. But it starts to matter when you think about Scopus and Google and other algorithms counting your research papers, counting citations to those papers, and the numbers that they come up with are very significant for job applications and promotion panels. And if they're not counting half your work because they think it belongs to another person of the same name, that's a real big problem.
Thanks for watching this first video. The second one will be about copyright, open access, and all sorts of issues to do with who pays for journal articles.